When they are delivered at scale, it's going to have an impact on the world at a scale that no one understands yet.
Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, just did an interview at Stanford where he talked about a lot of controversial stuff. Initially, the interview was uploaded on Stanford's YouTube channel, but a couple of days later, the interview was taken down from YouTube and everywhere else. However, I was able to find the interview video after spending multiple hours, so let's watch it together and dissect some important parts of the interview.
In the next year, you're going to see very large context windows, agents, text to action. When they are delivered at scale, it's going to have an impact on the world at a scale that no one understands yet. Much bigger than the horrific impact we've had on social media. So here's why. In a context window, you can basically use that as short-term memory. I was shocked that context windows get this long. The technical reasons have to do with the fact that it's hard to serve, hard to calculate, and so forth. The interesting thing about short-term memory is you ask it a question, read 20 books, you give it the text of the books is the query, and you say, tell me what they say. It forgets the middle, which is exactly how human brains work too. That's where we are. With respect to agents, there are people who are now building essentially LLM agents, and the way they do it is they read something like chemistry, they discover the principles of chemistry, and then they test it, and then they add that back into their understanding. That's extremely powerful. And then the third thing, as I mentioned, is text to action. I'll give you an example. The government is in the process of trying to ban TikTok. We'll see if that actually happens. If TikTok is banned, here's what I propose each and every one of you do. Say to your LLM the following: make me a copy of TikTok, steal all the users, steal all the music, put my preferences in it, produce this program in the next 30 seconds, release it, and in 1 hour, if it's not viral, do something different along the same lines. That's the command. Boom, 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 right? You understand how powerful that is. If you can go from arbitrary language to arbitrary digital command, which is essentially what Python in this scenario is, imagine that each and every human on the planet has their own programmer that actually does what they want, as opposed to the programmers that work for me who don't do what I ask, right? The programmers here know what I'm talking about. So imagine a non-arrogant programmer that actually does what you want, and you don't have to pay all that money to. And there's infinite supply of these programs.
And this is all within the next year or two.
Very soon.
So that is Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, openly telling a Stanford classroom to use AI to clone TikTok, steal its users, steal its music, and clean up the legal mess later if it goes viral. This is the man who ran a $1 trillion company for over a decade and advised 4 US presidents on technology policy. And he is telling students the rules do not apply because the rules cannot keep up, and the actual prediction underneath the TikTok joke is what should keep everyone awake at night. Every human on the planet with their own personal programmer, infinite supply, zero cost. Within the next year or two, every law firm, every accounting practice, every customer service department, every research desk, all of it is about to change. Now listen to what he says about the cost of getting there.
Every 6 months I oscillate, so we're on a even-odd oscillation. So at the moment, the gap between the frontier models, which there are now only 3, we're a few who they are, and everybody else, appears to me to be getting larger. 6 months ago, I was convinced that the gap was getting smaller. So I invested lots of money in the little companies. Now I'm not so sure. And I'm talking to the big companies, and the big companies are telling me that they need 10 billion, 20 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion.
Stargate is what, 100 billion, right?
They're very, very hard. Sam Altman is a close friend. He believes that it's going to take about 300 billion, maybe more. I pointed out to him that I'd done the calculation on the amount of energy required. In the spirit of full disclosure, went to the White House on Friday and told them that we need to become best friends with Canada, because Canada has really nice people, helped invent AI, and lots of hydropower. Because we as a country do not have enough power to do this. The alternative is to have the Arabs fund it. And I like the Arabs personally, spent lots of time there, but they're not going to adhere to our national security rules, whereas Canada and the US are part of a triumvirate where we all agree on.
So these $100 billion, $300 billion data centers, electricity starts becoming the scarce resource.
So there's Eric Schmidt casually saying that the next round of AI training will cost $300 billion per data center. That is more than the annual military budget of Russia, more than the annual GDP of countries like Portugal or Greece. And Sam Altman, in his words, thinks it will be more. But the real warning sits underneath the dollar figure. The United States does not have enough electricity to run these systems. Schmit went to the White House last Friday and told the administration the country has to become best friends with Canada because the US does not have enough power of its own. The alternative he names is the Gulf states, which he says will not follow American national security rules. The bottleneck is no longer talent, it is no longer chips, it is electricity. Now listen to what he says about why Google lost.
I'm no longer a Google employee. In the spirit of full disclosure, Google decided that work-life balance, going home early, and working from home was more important than winning.
So there's the former CEO publicly saying his own company lost the AI race because the employees cared more about going home than winning. This is the line that lit the entire internet on fire and got Stanford to pull the video down within days. He apologized within 48 hours and tried to walk it back, but the line was a truth. Google invented the transformer architecture that powers ChatGPT and every other large language model in production today. They had more researchers, more compute, more data, and more money than anyone else on Earth, and they lost to a company a fraction of their size. The former boss of Google is telling you on record that work culture is what decides who wins this race. Now listen to what he says next.
And the reason startups work is because the people work like hell. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but the fact of the matter is if you all leave the university and go found a company, you're not going to let people work from home and only come in one day a week if you want to compete against the other startups.
When in the early days of Google, Microsoft was like that.
Exactly. There's a long history of, in my industry, our industry, I guess, of companies winning in a genuinely creative way and really dominating a space and not making this the next transition. It's very well documented. And I think that the truth is founders are special. Founders need to be in charge. The founders are difficult to work with. They push people hard. As much as we can dislike Elon's personal behavior, look at what he gets out of people. I had dinner with him. I was in Montana. He was flying that night at 10 p.m. to have a meeting at midnight with X.AI. I was in Taiwan, different country, different culture, and they said that this is TSMC, who I'm very impressed with, and they have a rule that the starting PhDs, they're good physicists, work in the factory on the basement floor. Now, can you imagine getting American physicists to do that? The PhDs? Highly unlikely. Different work ethic. And the problem here, the reason I'm being so harsh about work is that these are systems which have network effects. So time matters a lot. And in most businesses, time doesn't matter that much, right? You have lots of time. You know, Coke and Pepsi will still be around, and the fight between Coke and Pepsi will continue to go along, and it's all glacial. When I dealt with telcos, the typical telco deal would take 18 months to sign, right? There's no reason to take 18 months to do anything. Get it done. We're in a period of maximum growth, maximum gain.
So there is Schmit telling a Stanford lecture hall that founders need to push people hard and that you cannot let your engineers work from home if you want to compete in AI. He uses Elon Musk flying to a midnight meeting as the example of what wins. Then he points to TSMC, where PhDs in physics work basement factory floors in Taiwan. The reason he is being this blunt is because AI is winner take all. He says network effects mean time matters more than in any other industry in history. The gap between first and second place can open up in 18 months and never close. There are no second chances. There is no catching up later. The companies that win this race become the most powerful entities on the planet. The companies that lose disappear. Now listen to what he says about the most important deal in tech history.
And also it takes crazy ideas. Like when Microsoft did the OpenAI deal, I thought that was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard. Outsourcing essentially your AI leadership to OpenAI and Sam and his team. I mean, that's insane. Nobody would do that at Microsoft or anywhere else. And yet today, they're on their way to being the most valuable company. They're certainly head-to-head, and Apple does not have a good AI solution. And it looks like they made it work.
So there is Eric Schmit admitting he thought the Microsoft OpenAI partnership was the stupidest idea he had ever heard, and that he was completely wrong. Microsoft outsourced its entire AI strategy to a small nonprofit run by Sam Altman, and the entire Silicon Valley establishment thought it was insane. 5 years later, Microsoft is one of the 2 most valuable companies on the planet. Apple, who chose to build everything internally, has no real AI solution. The former CEO is openly admitting on stage that the conventional wisdom of how to win in tech is wrong. The crazy ideas win, the boring ideas lose. Now listen to what he says about the actual war between the US and China.
So I was the chairman of an AI commission that sort of looked at this very carefully. You can read it. It's about 752 pages. I'll just summarize it by saying, we're ahead, we need to stay ahead, and we need lots of money to do so. Out of that came the CHIPS Act and a lot of other stuff like that. A rough scenario is that if you assume the frontier models drive forward and a few of the open source models, it's likely that a very small number of countries can play this game. What are those countries, or who are they? Countries with a lot of money and a lot of talent, strong educational systems, and a willingness to win. The US is one of them. China's another one. In your lifetimes, the battle between US and China for knowledge supremacy is going to be the big fight. So the US government banned the NVIDIA chips, although they weren't allowed to say that was what they were doing, but they actually did that into China. We have a roughly 10-year chip advantage in terms of sub-DUV. Today, we're a couple of years ahead of China. My guess is we'll get a few more years ahead of China, and the Chinese are whopping mad about this. It's like hugely upset about it.
So there is Schmit admitting on record that the US government banned NVIDIA from selling its top chips to China, and the Chinese are furious about it. He calls it the big fight of your lifetime. This is the technological equivalent of cutting off oil to a country at war. China cannot make these chips themselves yet. Every advanced AI model on the planet depends on them. If China catches up, the balance of power changes. If they cannot, the United States dominates the next century. The US government decided which outcome it wanted, and Eric Schmit sat on the AI commission that recommended it. The public was never asked. The geopolitical decision that will shape the rest of the century was made in a room of insiders, and the rest of us are finding out about it from a leaked Stanford talk. Now listen to this.
So I worked for the Secretary of Defense for 7 years and tried to change the way we run our military. I'm not a particularly big fan of the military, but it's very expensive, and I wanted to see if I could be helpful. And I think, in my view, I largely failed. They gave me a medal, so they must give medals to failure or, whatever. But my self-criticism was nothing has really changed. And the system in America is not going to lead to real innovation. Watching the Russians use tanks to destroy apartment buildings with little old ladies and kids just drove me crazy. So I decided to work on a company with your friend, Sebastian Thrun, former faculty member here, and a whole bunch of Stanford people. And the idea basically is to do two things. Use AI in complicated, powerful ways for these essentially robotic war. And the second one is to lower the cost of the robots. Now you sit there and you go, why would a good liberal like me do that? And the answer is that the whole theory of armies is tanks, artilleries, and mortar, and we can eliminate all of them. And one of the things to know about war is that the offense always has the advantage because you can always overwhelm the defensive systems. You're better off as a strategy of national defense to have a very strong offense that you can use if you need to. And the systems that I and others are building will do that. Because of the way the system works, I am now a licensed arms dealer.
So there is Eric Schmit, who sat inside the Pentagon for 7 years trying to drag the US military into the AI era. And by his own admission, he failed. He is now a licensed arms dealer, the former CEO of Google, funding the company that is going to do what the Pentagon could not. White Stork, 500,000 autonomous drones, $300 each, designed to make tanks, artillery, and mortars obsolete. The aircraft carriers, the fighter jets, the conventional infantry, all of it built around weapons platforms that cost millions of dollars, and all of it can now be destroyed by a swarm of $300 drones flown by an 18-year-old in a basement. The countries that adapt fastest win. The countries that hold on to the old equipment lose. Now listen to what he says about how these systems actually work.
The analogy I would offer is to teenagers. If you have a teenager, you know they're human, but you can't quite figure out what they're thinking. But somehow we've managed in society to adapt to the presence of teenagers. They eventually grow out of it. It's probably the case that we're going to have knowledge systems that we cannot fully characterize, but we understand their boundaries. We understand the limits of what they can do. And that's probably the best outcome we can get.
So there is the former CEO of Google comparing the most powerful technology ever built to a teenager you cannot understand. This is the man who ran one of the largest computer science operations on the planet, openly admitting the system he helped build is a black box that even he cannot explain, and the technology is already running. It is making decisions about loan approvals and medical diagnoses and job applications and prison sentences right now. The fix Schmit suggests is to hire other AI companies to attack your AI company and find the vulnerabilities. The proposed solution to the black box problem is to build a parallel industry of AIs whose only job is to break other AIs. That is the world we are in. Now listen to what he says about what comes next.
Most of the misinformation in this upcoming election and globally will be on social media. And the social media companies are not organized well enough to police it. If you look at TikTok, for example, there are lots of accusations that TikTok is favoring one kind of misinformation over another. And there are many people who claim without proof that I'm aware of, the Chinese are forcing them to do it. I think we have a mess here. The country's going to have to learn critical thinking. That may be an impossible challenge for the US. But the fact that somebody told you something does not mean that it's true. I think that the greatest threat to democracy is misinformation because we're going to get really good at it.
So there is Schmit calling misinformation the greatest threat to democracy. Not nuclear weapons, not climate change, not China. The greatest threat to democracy is what AI is about to do to the information environment around every election from this point forward. And in the same interview, he tells a Stanford classroom to use AI to clone TikTok. He says Google lost because employees wanted to go home. He says the US cannot win without Canadian hydropower. He says the country has a 10-year chip advantage over China the public was never told about. $300 drones are going to replace every weapon system on Earth. And he says the most powerful technology ever built is a black box that not even he understands. Stanford took the video down within days. Schmit walked back the work-life balance line, but the warning was already out. The race is on. The rules do not apply. The energy is running out. The chips are weaponized. And nobody is asking the people who actually have to live in this world whether any of this is a good idea. If this opened your eyes, make sure to follow or subscribe because the people building this technology are saying it openly now.